A very warm welcome, everybody, to our 143rd Security Thought Leadership webinar. And we're now going to be here every Thursday afternoon at this time. Or Thursday afternoon in the UK, Thursday morning some places, Thursday evening other places. This time every Thursday, where we'll be holding a thought leadership webinar on a topic of central importance to the security world. And the idea of thought leadership is that we critique today what's going on in order that we may have a better type of security tomorrow. And the topic this week is one that's right at the forefront of importance. It's often said that security officers being on the front line are the visible impression of the security sector worldwide. And the issue of their competence, it is argued, is the barometer by which people judge the whole security sector. Today, we're going to be talking about what is the competence of security officers, what needs to change to make it better. And this is all on the back of an IFPO sponsored research report looking at this very issue. And so we'll be exploring some of the findings that have emerged from that and many other issues too, with three experts who are involved in this subject in rather different ways. So in a second, I'll invite each of them to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I'll then invite them all each to make an opening statement, 3 minutes, when they get to say whatever they want to about this subject matter. Without further ado then, let's go and meet our panelists. And first of all, let me go all the way over to California and Joe. Joe, please, can you introduce yourself?
I am Joe McDonald, CPP, PSP, CMAS. I've been in security way too long. My expertise is in proprietary security and security systems. I am now retired, but I'm a board of director member of IFPO, and I was the committee chair for this research project.
Thank you very much indeed, Joe. And let's go now to Mario. Mario, can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Martin. And welcome everybody. My name is Mario Doyle. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Doyle Security Services, organization based out of the New York metropolitan area, but provides services across the US. We've got about 600 employees across the country. I hold various leadership roles in organizations like ASIS International and the TinyG, which is the Global Terrorist Information Network. So I look forward to this webinar. Thank you, Martin.
Mario, thank you very much indeed. And from the United States over to Canada and Glenn. Glenn, please introduce yourself.
So good day to everybody, wherever you are in the world. So Dr. Glenn Kitteringham, CPP. I've worked in the security industry for over 30 years now and have my own consultancy, and I'm one of the researchers on this project.
Thank you very much indeed. So if I could encourage the audience to use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions. If you get the questions in early, I'll try and make sure I incorporate the question in the ensuing discussion. That's after we've heard from our first panelist. That's when I'm going to ask now each of them in 3 minutes to give their thoughts on this topic. So Joe, back to you. Your opening statement, please, Joe.
Well, first thing, I would like to thank the sponsors of the research project. It can't be done without the dollars that make the wheel go roundy round. Doyle Security, Mario, thank you very much, one of the donors, one of the sponsors, as well as the researchers that did the project. It's at the International Foundation for Protection Officers was real big on making sure that the research was done by an academic research organization. Perpetuity did it for us. Martin and Glenn were both knee deep in that project for us, and thank you very much. I think this is very important, being in security as long as we have. We kind of think we know what the security officer is thinking, but you never know until you ask them. And what we found in our looking through research to find a subject to do, we found that no one has ever asked the security officers what they think. So we reached out. Perpetuity did surveyed over well over 10,000 respondents around the world, 7 countries. COVID sort of was a little bit of a problem for us, but I think it went well, and then followed up with many questions, talking to them directly and asking them what they thought about certain things. So if you haven't read the report, I strongly recommend it. It is a lot of information. And I think most important, it's a lot of information that needs to be digested by security management. Thank you.
Joe, thank you very much indeed. So Mario, let's go to you. Your opening statement, please, Mario.
Thank you, Martin. And again, I'd like to reiterate Joe's point about the value of this report. Again, long overdue, much needed. And an individual like myself has been digging into the report in its entirety, because to attack competence, you have to make sure that you're addressing the needs of the security officers on the front line. Okay, they're the heart and soul of the industry. I always say the organization they represent is just a brand, but they're the heart and soul of the industry. And how do you represent them? You take that research that the team has done and really dig into it. And for me, it's more giving them feedback. I know my team participated in the research project. They provided some feedback, and as part of that feedback, I'd asked them to share some of that with me. And what we've been doing is now taking the concerns they've had and the things that our officers want to see, and bringing back solutions to them as to how we as an organization are addressing it, but not just as an organization, as an industry. Because through webinars like this and through industry organizations like IFPO and others, we're communicating back to our staff that the information is valued and we're taking action. Listen, competence is critical in any industry, but I think the foundation of that is the image of the security officer. For us, for me personally, it's elevating the image of that security officer. And you do that through training, you do that through recognition. In the US, as most of us know, 85% of our critical infrastructure is in private hands. It's not in public hands, it's in private hands. That is not publicized enough. The good that officers do is not publicized enough. Sometimes in any industry, they focus on the negative rather than positive. And our mission should be elevating the image of the security officer, because by elevating the image, you attract better talent to this business, and you continue to increase the competence of the officer. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Mario. And encourage you, if you want to ask questions, please get it into the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll come to you and try and involve you in the ensuing discussion. I'll get your question in the ensuing discussion. There's the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Glenn, let's come to you. Glenn, for you, what were most important findings? What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so before I dive into this, I do have a little bit of a preamble, and the reason I brought this up is because I've already been asked this a couple of times on LinkedIn and other people, and so I want to acknowledge that there were two issues that, in our research that's common to most research, and that's to the percentage of responses. And even though, yes, we did get surveyed from over 10,000 people, but that's an overall tiny percentage of the overall number of security personnel who both work in the industry and work in individual countries, any given countries. To extrapolate this to say that this is completely reflective of either that country or the industry as a whole, that's a bit of a challenge. But again, this is common. And then the second issue, that there is a self-selection process that, when people are offered the choice of filling out a survey, well, that's the first choice they encounter. They can either fill it out or not. And what I believe is that is probably the most switched on, and the people who care most about the industry are probably the ones who are completing the survey. So again, that it does slant the findings somewhat. And so how do we overcome this, and how do we respond to identify what those roles of frontline security personnel are and what they find most difficult? And I think that the next step is for individual employers to get more involved in conducting their own research through internal surveys and focus groups. And I know a lot of people are terrified of the word research, but it doesn't have to be scary. It's just asking some questions. But I think it needs to be added to the agenda of human resources, because quite frankly, we're at a point with the pandemic and the discussion about, you know, that the people are not jumping to co-work for contract guard companies anymore, or in-house contract or in-house companies anymore. And so there's going to have to be a lot more focus on employee retention, and they're going to have to figure out how to keep their people happier. And a lot of that is through training. So I really do think that part of the responsibility is going to fall on HR. They're going to have to do post-exit interviews. I think account managers are going to have to do one-on-one interviews with their staff as to what they find challenging and what they find easy. And then following up on this is, how do we build on the good and bad points of training that we identified in this research? And for starters, I think we need to identify what good training actually is. And there is good trainers out there, but there's an awful lot of really bad trainers out there. And I think one of the pillars on which we move forward as an industry is that we need to strengthen the standards around trainers. Currently, within a lot of jurisdictions, as long as somebody's trained anybody in anything, and it can be completely unrelated to security, they're qualified to be a trainer. And they don't even need to have any they don't even have to have formal qualifications. It's just as long as they've trained. So this is encouraging, as far as I'm concerned, either bad trainers to continue doing what they're doing. And so I think one of the things that needs to be done is an increase in the standards of training. And the other thing is that there's been a focus over the last several years, and all my research is that governments and training institutions and employers are focusing on hours of training, so quantity over quality. There's very, very little research out there that actually proves that you know, would you rather have 40 hours of really good training or 100 hours of bad training or inconsistent training? And so again, I think there needs to be a greater emphasis on training, and there needs to be more research and more emphasis on better trainers and better training outcomes. And then finally, the last issue is that regarding improving the working conditions of the frontline workers, I am hearing and seeing from others that salaries are in fact increasing in some jurisdictions. And it's been my experience that typically security salaries lag probably 7 to 10 years behind most other sectors of the economy. And so it's high, we're long overdue for those salary increases anyway. But I am seeing salary increases, and I've been pushing my clients that they need to consider improving salaries for security staff. And so I also think this means looking at job responsibilities, duties, job descriptions, increased training, more and better career planning and employee development. And this is all designed to improve the working conditions of frontline workers. We know, based on this research, that security work is challenging. They got to know, security staff have to know a lot of things about a lot of different things, and they need to be supported. So that's turn it back over to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Let me ask Mario and Joe a question from Michael Gibbs. Very much as Glenn done. Mario, what for you are the main takeaways? What are the things your staff were most interested in regarding the report on competence?
When we looked at it, on a couple of different levels, on a management level and an employee level, right? Training, onboarding was a key component of where we realized that, based on the research and based on the feedback, that we needed to do more. Because again, at the end of the day, you know, Glenn touched on training and trainers in his opening comments. But one of the things we've seen over the last probably decade is a shift to online training. There are many agencies across the country that, you know, are primarily doing their training online. As we all know, not everybody learns the same way. So for us, it's a combination of that online, that learning management system, and that hands-on training. But more importantly, one of the things that came up in the discussions was confirming that training, the retention of that training is actually happening, the follow-up associated with it. I mean, those were one of the key takeaways that we initially, once we looked at that report and had some discussions, you know, I mean, are we providing the training the way the employee prefers it? Because there are people that prefer it in different formats. Are we confirming retention, and how are we following up to confirm that down the line that it has all been retained, and we're getting feedback from the employee on how we could better the program? You know, one of the things for me is, you know, I'm constantly asking our employees, what could we do better? Where are we failing? You know, I don't think enough companies and I don't think enough organizations do that. You know, speaking to our security officers and asking them, hey, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And trust me, if you give them some time, they're going to tell you. If they feel you want to know, you're going to take that information and you're gonna build upon it, they will share it with you. So, Martin, that was the initial takeaway for us.
Thank you very much indeed, Mario. Joe, I'm going to ask you the same question in the sense you take it from a slightly more detached view. For you, the key takeaway in terms of findings, Joe?
Well, obviously training is important, and that's a lot of the key questions asked, as well as a lot of the respondents talked about. But I would take it to the baseline of training, and that's the communications. There is obviously some of the statements from the respondents would indicate to almost to a point of being able to complain, but it also shows a lack of maturity. And the only way to get a relatively new security officer into the maturity of what security really is, and that is a customer service based thing. We're more than guards, gates, and guns anymore. People don't hire our security officers to do that. They hire them to be a part of the organization that does whatever needs to be done at that time. It may not be always security related, but who cares? But it's the communication, talking to them, explaining to them what the role is, the role of customer service, the realities of security today. Yes, we are, ever since 9/11, we're all fighting counterterrorism. I studied counterterrorism. I worked with DHS and the PSAs to work on different programs. And my officers always did too, because they were a part of it. But you also you have to communicate and listen in both directions. You need to listen to the officers, find out what their issues are. Mario, great point. You need to be able to take care of your officers. One of the reasons why some of the companies we talked about earlier before this started are doing so well is because they have the ability not so much to pay better, but they have this ability to grant benefits that are outstanding, or the benefits that people see as more positive than just a pay. So once again, communications also in the written form. Some of the respondents, and I have seen some horrible policies, horrible post orders, just a lack of put somebody on a post today and you hand them a phone number. If anything happens, call me. That's not a post order. That's not a direction. That's not communicating. That's not any kind of training whatsoever. But Mario, you also talked about the video training. There is a lot of benefit of video training. And the biggest benefit is you're teaching the same thing every time to every person, and you can document that. Unfortunately, documenting it is no longer a competency thing. It's a check in the box. Well, that's something else we need to get past. So training, communications, and maturity level of the security officers, not in their age, but in the maturity of what security is today.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to go now and move on. A few of the questions coming in are about what the response should be. Glenn, I wonder whether I could ask you first. Jerry Shields has asked this question. He asked it of the UK, but it's exactly the same in many other countries. This issue about low pay, frontline, and how this might be changed, Glenn. Glenn, one of the, were there any findings from this research about the complexity of the role, or about the importance of the role, about the competency of the role, which would feed the idea that we could look at this differently? Glenn, first.
That's a challenging question. I'm not entirely sure I truly understand it, but
well,
I will
sorry,
say,
Glenn, no, let me clarify because it's an important one. So the point I'm asking is, we've got this view, this image view of Frontline as being low paid and not very skilled and therefore not doing a complex job. We asked officers about whether their job was complex or not. Can we learn anything from there which will enable us to think differently about the role? Or are we right to see it's low paid, therefore, because it's an easy thing to do?
no, it's a highly complex job. I mean, we do know that. Now, the majority of the respondents said that even though it was complex, that it was relatively easy to learn, which is somewhat contradictory. But one of the things that I found is that when I used the model that ASIS International created for the enterprise security competency model for security, the majority of the security officers, what they found that the job itself was not complex. It was the co-workers who lacked basic skills, which made it difficult. And so that tells me that I think companies need to put more effort into hiring appropriate staff all the way around. So that's one, and I hope I'm answering the question. And the other one too is that this is where I go back to say that I think that HR departments need to be involved, and they need to do these competency assessments of these tasks and look at all the different skills that are actually required to successfully work as a security officer in today's environment. And it's a security manager telling everybody that the job is difficult isn't going to help it. You need to have an ally, and in this case, it's the HR, because they should have an understanding of all the tasks that are completed by all employees within an organization, and they need to start doing comparative analysis.
Okay, Glenn. Mario, let me come to a similar question from you, building on Gary's question. Mario, bottom line, is the real issue here getting clients to pay a decent salary? And if we'd done that and they were on board, this problem would go away. Mario.
I would say the challenge is who you have as your customers. Okay, my mother used to tell me this when I was a kid. Show me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. Today, I tell our prospects and our customers, look at our customer base. If you're dealing with organizations that value people, that value security, they are going to pay the officers a livable wage. But as an organization, you have a requirement to educate your customer as to what is needed to be paid to get a high level officer. Again, one of the biggest challenges in our business are not the customers, it's the companies. We underbid each other. We drive the wage down. If the industry set a tone and that a security officer doesn't make under a certain amount an hour or a year, however you look at it around the world, clients would have to pay that number, but we drive the wages down. So
what, Mario, but why, but I've heard this over the years, Mario. Here's the question. Why accept a contract which doesn't enable you, I don't mean you personally, I mean, why does the security companies drive the down to a point where they can't pay a decent wage? Why?
Because at times, the company makes the same profit margin, whether the guy makes $20 an hour or $40 an hour. You know what I mean? So from a profit and loss standpoint, the company looks at it as, hey, you know what I mean? I'm still making my margin that I'm looking for. Again, the key is we as security leaders, we as security professionals have to continuously work on elevating the industry. It starts with demonstrating the value of the security officers, ensuring they're paid a livable wage. A security officer shouldn't have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week just to put a roof over his head and food on his table. But unfortunately, that's the reality. And, we're continuously working towards it. But, again, I'm not popular for saying it, but I always say it. I don't blame the customers. I blame some of the contract security agencies. I blame how the image of the security officer. The image of the security officer is more like a night watchman, not a public safety officer. But that's who they are. They're responsible for public safety.
Okay, thanks, Mario. Just before I come back to you, Glenn, I'd just like to go to Joe, if I might, because I need to bring you in as well, Joe. Joe, a quick question from you. I guess from what we're hearing here is that this is there are bigger issues at play, structural issues at play. Now, you were formerly head of security for an organisation. I wonder what, Joe, what's internally, is there more of a selling job to be done about the value of frontline in security? And if so, why is it not obvious?
Real good question. I come from a company that was wonderful and enjoyed security, and a boss and owner that recognized the benefits of security. Also, being a critical infrastructure company, the requirements were a lot higher than most. So I don't know that I am the best person to answer that on a whole. We have hired contract guard forces when we're in dirt and before the infrastructure is put in for our new facilities. And, I talked to the salespeople or the site supervisor or whatever their title was at the time. And it's like, where are you going to get the officers to do this? The officer shows up, they're wearing jewelry, they're reading books on post, and they're not doing their jobs. And I think that comes back a lot with, I like to blame the site supervisor, but I also have to blame myself for not following up, making sure we have the right people. I would recommend, back to my comment about communications, not to belabor it, but I think it all comes back to that. Talking to the officer, explaining to them their role, explaining how important it is. But in reading the responses to the survey, there is a reality to some people hiring a security officer because they should or because they got to. Yes, you make sure everybody wears a badge, but not me. There's always going to be that in this world. It's sort of like everybody changed their password every 60 days, and it has to be so many characters. Oh my God, what are we going to do? It's just a reality. There's something about human nature that says, don't tell me what to do. And security has to be the one that has to deal with that. So there is a customer service aspect that has to be picked up all the time and communicated back.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Joe. Thank you very much indeed. And I guess know your customer, back to building on the point that Mario was saying. Glenn, I want to come to you next, if I might. And Sandy Davis has got a question. Sandy asked on behalf of IFPO, saying, what should IFPO do? But I wonder whether I could ask more broadly about, given the research findings, what's the role of associations in terms of generating a response? What should they do with this, Glenn?
Well, I think they need to go out to their members and encourage them to deeply look at the research and then look at what can they do with that and recognize that. And a broken record, training, and education. Like there needs to be a higher amount of it. And as I said, better trainers. But I think the associations need to support that. And just kind of aside to this, but I think related, I'm under no illusions that let's say right now the standard in Canada, let's say, is $15 an hour for a security officer. If we suddenly paid everybody $25 an hour, $15 an hour security officers are not going to start working at the $25 an hour level. In fact, it's counterproductive because they're going to sit there and say, I didn't have to do anything and now I'm making almost twice as much. So what we need to do is we need to attract a higher caliber of candidate, for starters. And so anyway, going back to Sandy's point, I just think that the associations need to acknowledge that the work is complex and it requires better initial training and then ongoing training, because that was something else that came out of the research as well, is that a lot of the people that I spoke to face-to-face said that what was missing was refresher training and ongoing one-on-one training and like more of a mentor-mentee type relationship with the more senior people on site. so they could provide more support for the junior people on site.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Mario, back to you. A question from Daniel Talbot, and probably this is hit at the heart of it. And Daniel's question is, how do you change the view that rather than seeing training as a cost, it's an investment? Good question, I think, Mario. So let me put it to you. Your thoughts?
Again, I think it's a great question. Again, it goes back to value, right? It goes back to reducing risk. Again, for me, how do you demonstrate that? I mean, again, you have to have a client that's a partner. You as an organization have to realize that every dollar that you invest in training is a dollar invested in reducing risk, in reducing liability. And that's the way I look at it. And that's the way we need to get our customers to look at it. Again, when it comes to customers, one of the things we do is try to educate them that when they're putting out an RFP, they should spec things like training, whether it's pre-assignment, on the job, ongoing, put that into your RFP for services. That way, everybody's matching apples to apples. I mean, everybody's bidding on the same platform. Too often, your proposals vary. And there are some organizations that take what they do very seriously. There's some organizations that are a little lax. And the customer at times is looking for the best value, right? How are you going to demonstrate that? Yeah, that's the key. But to answer your question, Martin, it's every dollar spent on training is a dollar spent towards reducing risk and liability.
Okay,
Martin,
thank you.
can I jump in here for a second?
Very quickly, Glenn, please. I've got to move on very quickly.
Okay, so there are multiple kinds of customers in the contract guard industry. It's like the automotive industry. There's some customers who want to buy a Yugo and some who want to buy a Cadillac. The problem is that everybody's pricing their even the Cadillac guards like they can sell them at the cost of a Yugo. Doesn't work. It's bad math. There needs to be an acknowledgement that we have different quality of customers out there.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate the point. Let me just stick with you very quickly because Mike Cummings is on this issue of training, Glenn. Very quickly, if you wouldn't mind, Glenn's running out of time. I want to get more questions in. And Mike Cummings says, would the challenge of training be helped by fewer generalist security positions and more specialist roles? I guess the point would be that would raise standards. And where you could offer credentials for expertise as a consequence of focus. I mean, realistic? Theoretically great, realistic?
I think so, and that goes back to my point, which is that I think we need to have higher standards for trainers, because unfortunately, the industry that I'm in, which is security consulting, every consultant out there says they're also trainers, and yet when I ask them, well, what training do you have? What education do you have in training? I don't need any training. So they're generalists, and they're making it up as they go along. And so, yes, we need more specialist positions. Absolutely, we need to have higher standards. For sure.
Joe, let me come to you. Johan Deploy asked a question about psychometric testing, getting the right people for a specific job. Can they handle abuse? Are they good control room operators? Are they alert to using complex equipment? Joe, I suppose this point is that when you see that sort of question, it gives the impression that some security tasks are more complex and indeed quite complex. Do you think that's managed? Is it true? And is it managed very well?
I've never used any kind of testing like that to determine. Unfortunately, my last employer fell to the shiny shoes world. Everyone who worked for me, as an officer was either former military or former law enforcement. The only ones that weren't were in security management. Some very talented security managers who were neither that worked for me did a wonderful job. But we found that if you put an ad out for security, you get everybody. And then and it's a tough weed through process. So when placing the requirement, and that was a contractual requirement by one of our customers at the time, the military law enforcement really assisted us in paring that down quickly. But we also did a couple other things. No one was ever hired with one interview. We went to a 2 interview, and the second interview was a panel discussion. You sat up against 4 managers or directors, because these are the people you have to work for, and they all have to agree that you need to be hired by us. So we were tough in our interviewing process. In fact, even in the application, you had 20 minutes to fill out the application. If you couldn't fill out a 2-page application in 20 minutes, your time management skills were not up to our standard. So back to your question about the testing, I'm sure Mario will agree that that's an expense that I doubt any customer would be willing to pay for. So we have to do it the old-fashioned way. But I would also, I'm sorry, the sun's moving over here.
Quickly, Joe,
I would also say that it comes back to management.
I was just about, Joe, I was about to ask that very question, funny enough. I'll turn to Mario on that very issue. Joe set me up perfectly, because Ben here, Mario, asked the question, competency is a wide spectrum. What actually makes you competent? And in your opening statement, one of the things you mentioned, Mario, was this point about managers. And I wonder to what extent we need to hold managers to account a lot more for the performance of frontline officers. In other words, clients, you've got to pay more. Certainly companies, you've got to train more, but managers, you've got to do a better job. Mario?
Martin, you're spot on. You're spot on. Again, at the end of the day, as an organization grows, they have the ability to put those layers in. Again, it's not about hiring a security officer and sending him to a site, and that's where it ends. It's that continuous coaching and mentoring that needs to be done. But to Glenn's point, your managers, your trainers, at times managers double as trainers. They're the ones that play that client service role, and they play that employee coach and mentor role. They've got to have the background and they've got to have the experience, but more importantly, they have to understand what the frontline security personnel go through every day. There's times when you have managers and directors that have never held a post. They've never stood out there and understood what that security officer goes through. Again, it's a key component of having a great program. It's having a team of leaders that first and foremost value their frontline service workers. They're their biggest advocates. They're there communicating to the customer, not only all the good that's being done, but all the things that we need to do. You do it through quarterly business reviews. Again, if you don't sit down with your customers and tell them the value you're adding to their organization, they're never going to know. You've got to get that customer to buy in. And to Glenn's point, there are different levels of customers, some that value it, some that value their program, and some that look at you as a vendor. As an organization, for me, you want a customer that looks at you as a mission critical partner, not a vendor. Because if they bought your services because you were the lowest price, you're a vendor, you're not the mission critical partner. If they brought you into their organization because you provide the best value that's going to be offered to their organization, that's who you start a relationship with. That's who you build a relationship with, and that's where security officers want to work. There's retention, there's a sense of ownership by frontline service workers.
Thank you very much indeed, Mario. I'm going to ask a question now, Joe, for you. Very briefly, if you wouldn't mind, Joe, because I'd like to get Glenn in on this one as well. And Simon Chan asked a good question about whether part of the problem here is, as Mario was already saying, some customers are using security officers without giving it enough thought. Is it also the case people sometimes resort to saying we'll have security officers when either they're not needed or are not the best solution and other solutions might be better? Joe, is there a possibility that's an issue here? If you very briefly wouldn't mind, Joe.
Well, technology can take the part of many security officers, no doubt about that, but technology can't patrol an area as well as a person can. It can be augmented by technology, but technology costs money. Infrastructure costs money, and that is an operating cost that most companies don't budget for too far enough in advance. As well as the technology is changing so quickly in these days. You put all the wire in place and then you find out you don't need the wire, or you put the wrong wire in. So there's an issue with technology. I actually think one of the problems, and this is a little bit to Mario's point, is Apple changes their iPhone once a year or twice a year, 3 times a year, but they're constantly making their product better. I think what in security we forget is our security officers are our product. They are our product. When you look at the security officer, what do you see? And when was the last time you tried to better your product? Have you looked at your product, figured out what it needs to be better, and how have you tried to make that better? And Glenn, that's obviously a training issue. I think that's something the security needs to do. And by all means, some of the comments I'm seeing below, your people need to be certified. IFPO has the CPO. It's a wonderful certification. It's a baseline certification. It gets them going. It gets 3 letters after their names. The managerial certifications are needed. CPP, PSP, APP. These are things that should be almost a requirement in our industry.
Okay, Joe.
I don't know if I can answer your question, Martin. Sorry.
Definitely answer my question. So come to you, Glenn. Same point. Joe raised some good points there about there are problems with other alternatives too. Is the future for security officers a bright one, Glenn?
Only, I think, if the clients figure out that the foundation, what they need, are properly trained and motivated employees. I'm seeing too many clients and too many organizations who think that some piece of technology, some magic pill is going to fix all their problems, and that they don't realize that people need to be around to operate that technology. And they've swallowed this line from these tech companies that technology will replace people. And in some cases, they will replace them. So there are less security officers, let's say, but you still need security officers to plan, and security people to plan the use of technology, to operate it, to respond to it, to update it, and to think that some magic piece of technology is going to fix everything. That's silly. It's just flat out silly. It's wrong.
Thank you. I'll give a final comment to you, Mario, on this, because this hits at your world. Mario, are you seeing any sign that customers are switching away from people to technology on the frontline work? Mario, just 1 minute, if you wouldn't mind, Mario.
I would say they're attempting to. Some have tried and failed. And I'll give you a quick example. Some people went from having man guarding to remotely monitoring and managing their facilities. They may have had a major weather event, and their facilities are totally unsecured because now they don't have any bodies because the power's out, right? For us, and what we always say, it's the best people and the best technology makes the best security program. Again, it's not all people, it's not all technology, but you can have a great program with a combination of technology but more importantly, the best people that operate that technology.
Mario, thank you very much indeed. Panel, thank you. Thank you so much indeed for your insights. We could have gone on. So much is coming out of that. Thank you very much indeed also to you, the audience, for your questions. Wow, really big topic, and we'll definitely be revisiting this, and we'll definitely be picking up on it. A few final comments. Just to let you know, you can get a copy of the report on which this whole project was based. It's free. You can go directly to the IFPO website at that address, or just go to the Perpetuity Research website and it'll direct you to the IFPO website where you can get a copy of that report free of charge, and something to build on. Just the OSPAs, to let you know, Outstanding Security Performance Awards. Entries are open in Ireland, in India and New Zealand. So do get your entries in if you're in those countries. Do spread the word. Let people know entries are open. Also to say that if you'd like to book your place at an award ceremony, this time next Thursday, after our webinar, you'll be able to attend the Norway Outstanding Security Performance Awards presentation. Find out who the outstanding performers are in Norway. On the 6th of December, the Tackling Economic Crime Awards. On the 14th of December, the first ever Cyber Oscars. And those first 3 are virtual, they're free, you can tap in from anywhere in the world, and your chance to find out what's going on. And Christine Brooks at the moment is working on all of those. And let's just say, virtual award ceremonies like you might not have seen them before, particularly the techers and cyber ones, which are quite big events. And also on the 24th of February, the UK Oscars were back to physical events, we hope, at the UK on the 24th of February. We had Germany 2 weeks ago, the first physical award ceremony of the whole year. Fantastic over in Germany. And finally to say, we're back next week with the Norway Thought Leadership webinar, finding out about Scandinavia generally. Then we've got the Oscars Awards afterwards, be very quickly. The following week is about Ireland. Then we've got one on food insecurity. And then we've got one about security and journalism. Is the industry getting the reporting that it deserves? Key issues, key topics, different contexts, a chance to think about what's happening today in order that we get a better type of security tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed to Sarah Gray and to Christine Brooks in the background for their support. Thank you once again to the panel for your fantastic insights. Thank you to you, the audience, for your questions. I hope to see you next Thursday at the Scandinavia webinar. Until then, until I see you again, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.